Welcome. In this mini lecture, we're going to talk about units and measurements, physical measurements. What is a physical quantity? Well, a physical quantity is a measurement that has a number associated with it. Rather than saying, well, that car is very large, we would say that car is this long by this tall by this wide, or weighs this many pounds or this many tons. It's a physical quantitative measurement of an object. What is the mass of an electron? How far is it between here and Minneapolis? These are physical quantitative measurements. So these measurements fall under different units. You can choose different units when measuring different things, and humans usually pick a unit that allows measurements to reasonable measurements between 1 and 100. Like, for example, our weight. Weights are typically chosen, so people, weigh between, 1 pound and 200 pounds, give or take, depending on the size of the person. We don't measure our weight in tons. We could, but that's not a really valuable unit. We could also measure our weight in grams, but again, not a very unit that's appropriate for measuring human weight. It's like measuring distances. We measure distances between cities in miles. We could use inches, it's a measurement of length, but the numbers become so large they lose meaning. Or we could measure the distances between cities in light years, but then those units, the measurements become so small as to become meaningless. So we typically pick measurements that have real world application for the type of thing that we're measuring. Measuring the weight of trucks in tons, but measuring the amount of chemicals in a prescription in milligrams. So the units that we'll be using largely in Physics 141 are SI units. SI units there are 7 SI units, some of which we won't be using, but there's the length in meters, time is measured in seconds, mass is measured in kilograms. Notice it's not grams, it's kilograms or 1,000 grams. Temperatures are measured in Kelvin, which you might be familiar with from a chemistry course. They're similar in step size to centigrade or Celsius, but it's an absolute zero temperature scale. So these 4 units we're going to be using quite a bit this semester. Other SI units include the ampere, which is the amount of electricity that passes, or current that passes an area every second, and candela, which is related to the brightness of an object, but this one is rarely used. And finally, moles, the quantity of a substance. So all the units we'll be using this semester, units of energy, units of pressure, units of force, all can be broken down into the 7 SI units. For example, area is meters squared, volume is meters cubed. Now I have a sheet, which is called unit conversion sheet, that's available on D2L for you to download, which lists these 7 SI units and all the other units that we may use and how they relate to these SI units. Now the SI units are usually units used for the scales, again, that we measure every day. Distances, meters for the size of a room, seconds for some event that's occurring in front of us, kilograms is the unit of mass, Kelvin, a unit of temperature, although Kelvin is not a common unit outside of the science classroom, outside of a lab. These units can be converted from other lengths, other types of units. For example, meters, you might measure things in feet. Well, how do you get from feet to meters? We'll talk about that in the next video about unit conversion. Seconds, other times, years, months, days, milliseconds, microseconds, kilograms is the unit of mass. Could be micrograms or just grams. Kelvin is the unit of temperature. How do you get to Kelvin from Fahrenheit and Celsius? These popular conversions are given on that sheet. Conversions are usually given in your textbook, and you can find these online. We will be using these SI units. Now, if you specialize, for example, if you become an astronomer, you may use units that are not SI units. For example, the SI unit for energy is the joule. The unit used in astronomy that's not SI is ergs. Sometimes there's a history, a background of why certain disciplines use different units, but just realize that all the units that you measure, all the physical quantities that you measure, can be broken down into these 7 SI units.